In today's story, we return once again to the writings of the Canadian horror author Craig Davidson, right under his pen name Nick Cutter. The Deep is Cutter's much anticipated follow-up to the novel The Troop. I've covered The Troop before on this channel, so if you're interested in the book, check out that channel. If you're at all familiar with the, let's say, artistic choices made by Cutter in his past works, you know what to expect here. The Deep has body horror galore, plenty of creepy crawlies, and far too much animal mutilation. Honestly, I should say this now, if you're sensitive to violence against animals, this book is not for you. I cannot say that enough. Before we get too far though, as always, this is a recap, which means there will be spoilers. Please go read the book before watching the video. If you're still here, you've been warned. Okay, with that out of the way, let's dive right into Nick Cutter's The Deep, pun intended. The Deep follows our protagonist, a veterinarian named Luke Nelson. Luke is being driven to Guam on his way to the coast. While driving, he sees an old man walking into a wall, his head's covered in praying mantises. The man is infected with the Gets. He's not alone either. All over the world, people have fallen victim to the sickness. For people infected, things start off slow. They forget little things, then as time goes on, they forget more and more, until they simply forget to live. Luke knows there's nothing really he can do for the man, so he continues with his journey. The world has been decimated by this disease. Luke recounts that it wasn't the apocalypse we've all expected. Instead, it happened painfully slow. And I think that's important to remember for this story. The world doesn't have long, but there is hope. His presence has been requested on the offshore rig known as the Hesperus, where there's a potential cure for the Gets being researched. He boards a yacht on the coast and arrives at the Hesperus. There he meets Dr. Conrad Fells and Lieutenant Commander Alice Sykes, who simply goes by Al. Dr. Fells and Al tell Luke about the mission. They tell him about the research station located miles and miles below them, deep in the Mariana Trench. The station is called the Triest. Luke's brother is one of 3 scientists working in the Triest. His brother is some kind of insufferable prodigy, and he and Luke don't have any meaningful relationship. The video feed of the Triest has gone dark, and the personnel on the Hesperus can no longer check in on the station. On top of that, Dr. Westlake recently resurfaced, another one of the 3 scientists below. He was nothing but a mess of scars, having cut himself to shreds on the ascent, but living to survive because it kept healing itself. The personnel on the Hesperus are growing worried, but they receive an audio message from Clayton, Luke's brother, asking for Luke to come find him. Down deep in the ocean, deeper than anyone has ever been, a gelatinous substance they call ambrosia was discovered. The ambrosia seems to have restorative features, which might provide a cure for the Gets. Al and Dr. Fells tell Luke that his brother represents the best hope for all humanity, and for finding a cure. They ask him if he could go down and speak with his brother, and while down there, ascertain whether things are okay on the station. Luke agrees, and he and Al board the small submarine called Challenger 5. Challenger 5 descends 1,300 meters per hour. They are plummeting towards the bottom of the sea, and the light is quickly fading. As they get deeper, Luke finds that his deepest memories begin to surface. He thinks of his mother, a morbidly obese woman who loved to touch him and his brother, in an inappropriate way. They see a sperm whale and bioluminescent plankton. Luke recalls the time he met his wife, Abby Jeffries. The sub is attacked suddenly by a giant squid, and they only just manage to escape. Below 20,000 feet, the duo finally reach their destination, the Triest. The Triest is a network of black tubes, giving it the impression of a spider crawling on the ocean floor. They dock and enter the station. Luke boards first, and inside the mental pressure is overwhelming. He's surprised by a dog running at him. The dog is a chocolate lab. Luke decides to name the dog Little B, or LB. Luke explores a bit, and while exploring he thinks of his son Zachary, who was lost while the two of them were playing hide and seek at a park. Luke was counting, and when he was done, Zachary was nowhere to be found. He searched everywhere. This loss cost him everything. He separated from his wife shortly thereafter. It isn't long before Luke finds his brother Clayton, or Clay. Clay is somewhat surprised, but he's overall unfazed by Luke's presence. He takes Luke to his lab though, where there is a massive floor-to-ceiling window peering into the vast darkness outside. Outside that window there are chunks of ambrosia tumbling across the ocean floor. Luke tells his brother about the audio message they received above, but Clay simply dismisses it. He says he didn't make it and that he doesn't need his help. Not wanting to continue arguing with his brother, Luke retires to Dr. Westlake's bunk to get some sleep. There he finds Westlake's computer and listens to several audio recordings on it. Westlake claims that he found a small black shimmery hole thing in the wall of his lab. He mentions that he feels drawn to this hole. Later, Luke is in Clay's lab again, where Clay shows him what ambrosia can really do. He shows Luke a guinea pig that has been killed and exposed to ambrosia. The rodent came back to life and became incredibly violent. Luke recalls how heartless his brother was with his specimens. He remembers a time when him and his brother would go out and travel near this drainage pipe to collect specimens. He also remembers hearing a noise coming from that pipe one time, which spooked him and his brother. Probably the only time he's ever seen his brother that spooked. They left quickly, and looking back, Luke remembers seeing long fingers coming from the pipe. To me, this moment really calls back to Stephen King's novel, It. Snapping back, Luke looks for Al. He finds her staring at Dr. Westlake's lab door, which was sealed and the windows were completely black. Like the hole mentioned in Westlake's recordings, his lab door also pulls you in. And weirdly, Al is just standing there speaking with the door. With everything happening, Luke and Al decide that they need to leave. However, the sub is completely out of power when they try to. They need to find a generator to get it running, and Luke is moving through the station to do this when he runs into Dr. Hugo Toy's lab. Toy was the third and final scientist in the Triest. Dr. Toy allows Luke into his lab, and he isn't as crazy as Clay and the others made him out to be. But that doesn't mean that he's not paranoid though. He doesn't trust Luke and tapes him up as a result. He explains to the taped up Luke that ambrosia isn't a gift, it's a threat. He says that his lab also has a hole, just like the one in Westlake's lab. While warning Luke, the Trieste itself begins to attack Dr. Toy. The ceiling bulges down and starts to crush him, slowly. It's like it's almost playing with him before killing him. Luke frees himself and tries to help, but there isn't anything he can really do in this situation, so he just escapes. Luke races back to his brother's lab and tries to grab him so they can escape the underwater station. While there though, he learns that his brother's lab also has a hole, and that his brother has placed his hand in the hole for some reason. As a result, Clay's hand has grown black and gross. Clay attacks Luke, but Luke is able to use this poison from the euthanasia kit to subdue him. His brother passes out, and while sleeping, his brother's hand rips itself from its body, seemingly having a mind of its own. Luke throws the hand in the cooler while he can, with the not-so-dead guinea pig from earlier. Now that his brother is unconscious, Luke must drag him to the Challenger if they plan to escape. While dragging his brother, Luke is pursued by this giant white maggot thing with the face of his ex-wife. It's just another example of how his trauma is finding its way into his reality. It's hard to know if these creatures are real, and if they pose an actual threat, or if they just exist in Luke's mind. Luke makes it to the Challenger with his brother, but while this is happening, Luke realizes LB has gone missing. LB has been his trusty protector throughout this whole story, and if you think he doesn't go there, I'm sorry to tell you, Cutter does. I won't describe any of it in this recap, just know that LB doesn't make it off the Trieste. While looking for Al, Luke finds her in Westlake's lab, spliced into this massive beehive. The same beehive that Luke read about earlier in Westlake's journals. The bees in this hive are the size of rats. They have skin-colored abdomens and red eyes. Luke moves to save Al, but it becomes clear that this isn't going to be possible. She pleads with him, in fact, claiming that she is their mom now. Luke decides to return to Clay and the Challenger. When Luke returns to the Challenger, he finds that his brother has a red cord running from his arm to the hole in the wall nearby. The things inside the hole want his brother back. It becomes clear quickly that he can't take his brother back to the surface with him. Luke touches the cord connected to his brother, and their two memories meld together. He learns that his brother poisoned his mother to death after she touched him inappropriately. Luke snaps back and Clay is dragged away. Luke hears his son's voice and returns to Clay's lab. He finds a door under the bench in the lab. Inside the door, Luke finds a staircase spiraling down into the earth below. He descends further into madness. He eventually finds two figures standing before a cliff of flesh. One is taller and the other is shorter and rounder. They appear similar to his parents, but different at the same time. These are the Figment, a name Luke gave to the monsters in his son's bedroom when his son was young. They were figments of his imagination, hence Figmen. The Figmen promised to give Luke back his son if he agreed to return to the surface, freeing him in the process. It seems like, to Luke, that these creatures are the ones who took his son way back at the park. Luke refuses their gift though. Then a black cocoon appears before him, splits open and purple sludge spills out. Two long arms with impossibly long hands jut out. A black head as well. His son's face appears, and these tendrils leave Zachary's face and begin piercing Luke's. Luke melds with his son's consciousness, essentially, leaving nothing human behind. Luke returns to the Challenger and he begins his ascent. Back on the surface, the thing using Luke's body is greeted by the mutilated figure of Dr. Westlake. The story ends with this teasing scene. The Deep was a decent enough read, but there was definitely some things that I didn't enjoy as much. First, there were a ton of meandering scenes in which Luke was just wandering around the Triest, remembering a bunch of unimportant memories that had very little to do with the overall story. There are also so many scenes where Luke is standing in tunnels listening to slithering. If I have to read any more about slithering, I think I'm going to lose my mind. I think my interpretation of The Deep is a story about depression and a father that submits to that depression. Luke is a father who has lost everything, and his world is quite literally dying around him. He is spiraling, and his journey to the bottom of the sea, in my opinion, represents him sinking into this depression. While deep in this depression, he must confront his past. He must learn to let the regret he feels about his son go, but ultimately he isn't able to, and sadly, it cost him everything. Overall, The Deep was not that scary. It was tense in the beginning, but I felt that over time, that tension was squandered. With that being said, I give The Deep a 2 on the scary meter. It's just not that scary. I think that the scariest scene for me is when Al is spliced into the hive. This is a terrifying image to me. I don't really like bees, and that's about as far as it goes. What The Deep lacks in scares though, it definitely makes up for with blood. I give The Deep a 4 on the bloody meter. Like The Troop, The Deep is a bloody story. That puts The Deep in the bloody harmless category. If you're not a squeamish person, there isn't much to fear. With all that out of the way, I've said my bit about Nick Cutter's The Deep. Let me know yours in the comments. And thank you all for watching these bite-sized recaps. See you in the next story. Bye.